Cool. The stream is starting up right now, and as soon as it initializes, I'll let the guests in. Cool. We are live. Thank you.
Is the live stream going on? Is it on YouTube yet?
Yes, we are live on YouTube, so we can say
Yes.
It's on YouTube.
yeah. So we can say Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova to everybody who's found us on the YouTube live stream, and we're also joined in Zoom. We can say good morning to Janet, to Yana and Natasha and Kyle.
Excuse me for a moment.
Sure.
My wife is telling me they're only seeing the Rosh Hashanah. They're only seeing the family field service.
There should be multiple streams that are available on the YouTube channel. So if they go
one moment.
Yep. So if anybody is also looking to find us on the YouTube page, on our YouTube channel, on the live page, there are multiple streams that have gone live. And all throughout the day, if you're looking for the different YouTube channels, after this service completes, we're going to leave you at about 10:30 this morning. And you can jump into those other Zoom meetings with the other services, or you can join on YouTube with the different streams, either with the field service that's going to be going on from 11 to 1, or with the traditional and truncated, or with Keva and Kavana.
Okay,
Great.
it's 9:02. Shall we begin?
Let's begin.
Okay, everybody, welcome. I see Natasha and Yana, and hello to Kyle and Judith. Let me see others. Becky and Janet, hello. Ruth and Anna, nice to see you there. Okay, so just to begin, the Hebrew word tzimtzum, you may have heard that before. It means contraction or narrowing. It's a Kabbalistic term, and it refers to the concept of God contracting God's self, or his Ein Sof, his infinite light, to allow space for individual and physical worlds to exist. So this happened many, many eons ago. But today, we in our homes, we're in our own narrow places. And today we are in, pardon the pun, Zoom. And it's not where we are used to being for Rosh Hashanah, but it is where we are. And because of COVID, our narrowness is intensified. So one of the messages of the High Holy Days is that although we may be in a place of narrowness, through teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and righteousness, we can expand ourselves and we can become open to new possibilities. We can rediscover our potential, and we have the opportunity to refine our souls. So this morning together, we'll attempt to counteract Zoom, and we'll proceed through the Machzor. We're going to focus on specific prayers, their melodies and themes, and we'll talk about and reflect or meditate on them. I don't want to let this moment pass without acknowledging the passing of a great soul, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May her life continue to inspire us in many, many ways to pursue justice in the days and months and years ahead. Be aware that there's also a blessing in being in a narrow place. From my teacher, Rabbi Jonathan Omerman, I learned that you can't get through a narrow place with all your baggage. So this is an opportunity to shed your baggage, to shed the baggage that encumbered you this past year. So while not a traditional service, we hope you find it thought-provoking uplift, and meaningful. And I turn it over to Rabbi Cantor Hilary Chorney for the next section.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with Cantor Joel Stern. I'm so glad that we get to be together in this learning and sacred and uplifting environment. I want to point out this idea about waking up in the morning and the way that God wakes up in the morning, or rather doesn't need to wake up in the morning because God does not sleep. Vadonai lo yanum velo yishan. Hameorer Yeshenim, the Hamakitz Nirdamim. You can find this on page 67 of your Machzor. The idea is that God neither slumbers nor sleeps, but God is responsible for waking those who sleep. We find this idea all throughout the Tanakh, throughout the Hebrew Bible, throughout the Psalms in particular. So when we wake up in the morning, the first thing we need to pay attention to is, are we awake? And when we wake up, we ask, what do we notice? What do our senses tell us? Are we comfortable? Are we too comfortable? So we're going to spend a few moments in a little bit of a meditative state to wake ourselves. I want to invite you to get comfortable. I'll model this for just a moment. I'll ask for you to either seat yourself or get yourself in a grounded position so that you can bring your breath from the most grounded place in yourself to the top of your being. Take it deep in for a 4 count and then out for 5. In, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you draw that breath in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want you to notice every part of your body that breath is passing through. What muscles are awake from the bottom of yourself? How many steps have you walked today? Have you been around the block, or have you barely moved from your spot? So many of us don't go so far these days. We are in that narrow place, but sometimes we take many steps even within that narrow place. Are your feet awake? Are your ankles, your calves, your knees? As you fill your belly with air, ask, is your belly awake? Have you fed it? Are you hydrated? Are you drinking? Take a sip if you have something near you, and if not, feel free during the service to get something. And remember to keep breathing and filling that belly with air. 1, in, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you bring your attention to the tops of your bodies, I invite you to open your eyes and think of God as the Pokeach Ivrim, as the one who is actually the opener of eyelids. I thank my friend Charlie Kramer, who is a song leader of limited sight, who teaches us in his Singing in the Dark program about blindness and the way that our eyes are open, about this blessing and the idea of God being the opener of eyelids. That in fact, we open our eyelids in the morning, that our eyes, in fact, are perpetually open. It's our eyelids that merely need to lift up. And so today, every time you blink, it's a new opportunity to open your eyes again to this new world. I want to invite you at this time to keep paying attention to your breath. Don't forget, I'm going to keep reminding you to come back to it. Don't forget, it's an autonomous function. It should happen on its own, but sometimes we need to remind our bodies to stay centered with it. And I want to invite you to think with me, join with me, and even hum with me as I sing for us the last couple lines of Adon Olam and remind us that last night we entrusted our souls to God and our bodies to God, and we are now awaking to the gratitude that we are back here opening our eyelids with, thank God, functioning bodies, and we are here. So here are those words. Biyado afkid ruchi ve'etishan ve'a'ira ve'im ruchi giviati Adonai li ve'lo ira. Biyado afkid ruchi ve'etishan ve'a'ira ve'yado afkid ruchi ve'etishan ve'a'ira ve'imiruchi geviati Adonai li ve'lo ira ve'imruchi ve'imiruchi geviati Adonai li ve'lo ira. In your hands, here's the English. In your hands, I leave my soul when I'm awake, when I'm asleep, and when I walk, I sing to you a prayer of thanks, a prayer of thanks, and when I walk, and when I walk, I sing to you a prayer of thanks, a prayer of thanks. That prayer of thanks, Moda'ani lefanecha, melechai v'kayam, shechazarta bi nishmati b'chem la'raba emunatecha. Thank you, God, for having woken up today. I turn this back to you.
So thank you so much. We now move into the beginning of the Shacharit service with the word Hamelech. Melech, many of you probably know, means king or sovereign. And normally on Shabbat and holidays, we say the word Hamelech as part of the intro to the Shacharit service. We start mainly with Shochenad. But on high holidays, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we begin with Hamelech, because that is the theme of the day. This is the day that we encounter the divine that is not within us. This is the God that is other, and that is which is beyond us. And the melody for this particular section is unique just for this prayer, and it goes like this. Yai dai 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 yai dai 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 dai. I invite you to sing along with me. Yai dai 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 dai. So it would continue with the words Uvilshon Chasidim, Uvilshon Chasidim. Titkadash, and it ends Ubakeret Kadoshim Titalav. And then the ending of the section in the Yishtabach, the last two lines, El HaHodaot Adon HaNiflaot. Sovereign God, to whom we offer thanks and ascribe wonders. And it ends, Habocher B'Shirei Zimra, Melech Elchei HaOlamim. Now it's interesting, the word shir means song. The one who delights in the chorus of song, as the translation says. But as Rabbi Bunam of Pshischa says, the word shireh can be translated as remnants or leftovers. So in another interpretation of this phrase, God wishes to see how much of the sentiments of our prayers remain with us after we close the Siddur. Thus, instead of translating it as it shows in our Siddur, instead, he chooses what is left over after the songs of praise have been uttered. So I ask you to contemplate, to reflect for a few moments, what are your goals for this season? What do you want to remain with you at the end of these days of awe? We'll take a couple of moments to reflect. Along the lines of the theme of shir, song, as an interlude to our next section, I'd like you to join me in this melody, Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah. Let us sing a song of praise to God. Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah. 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 Havana Shira, Shir Hallelujah.
Every Shachrit service, in fact, every Shachrit and every Mariv service, every evening service, every morning and every evening throughout the entire Jewish calendar year, we have the same structure in our services. We begin with a call to worship, and then we begin with a blessing for gratitude for life. And after we start with that blessing for gratitude for life, we enter the following blessing. Yotzer or uvore choshech, osei shalom, uvore et hakol. Creator of life and creator of darkness, just another word for creator. Osei shalom, maker of peace, and creator of all, which we're not going to get into at the moment, but is a little bit of a twist on the original biblical quote. But then there is a second line, or olam be'otzar chayim, orot me'ofel, amar vayehi. You can find this in your Machzor on page 71. The eternal light is found in the treasury of life, who spoke, whereupon out of darkness there came light. Here's an alternate translation for that verse. God said, let there be light from darkness. God spoke, and it was. And it introduces a major melodic theme of the High Holy Day services. It changes in the music there. This is unique to just the Machzor. unlike every other service in the morning time in Shachrit, when we get Yotzer or Uvore Choshech, and we get this special oral olam line, we get this special melody. Olam ve'otzar ha'chaim, orot mihofel, amar vayehi. Again, the eternal light is found in the treasury of life, who spoke, whereupon out of darkness there came light. And I wonder, why do you think this extra line was inserted on Rosh Hashanah and also on Yom Kippur? Why do we spend so much extra time considering in our morning services that light is not only part of God's creation in the beginning and every day, but also found in the treasury of life, in the Otzar Chayim? Further, I want you to consider and contemplate, what are the sources of light in your life? What pierces the darkness for you? What are the sources of light in your life? What pierces the darkness for you? And I wonder if there might be anyone who joins us this morning who has an answer to offer to either of these questions. Why you think that we have this extra consideration about light being found in the treasury of life this time of the year, or who might want to share with us what the source of light is in your life, or right now, what light is piercing the darkness for you. And if you like, you can indicate, and you can find a way to let us know that you'd like to share with us, and we would welcome your contribution, especially if you can find a way to be lean in your sharing. You can go ahead and you can raise your hand, either virtually or actually in your window if your camera is turned on. And we have somebody here with us, Lucas, who can help us to have you unmuted. A moment to think on this. Kendra Jewel, do you see on your screen anybody who's raising their hand? Because I don't have a view on mine.
Marlise.
Great. So let's have, yeah, go ahead and.
Yeah, I just want to say my family members, loved ones are lights in my life and bring light to me.
That's beautiful. And I know, Marlise, that this has not, there have been some extra layers of darkness this season, and it makes me very joyful to know that there are extra family members and hopefully friends as well who are layers of light in your life. Is there anyone else? It looks like Kyle might want to share something. Kyle, do you want to share?
Yeah. As you know, Rabbi, at least, I'm converting to Judaism. And actually, it was yesterday I told my dad that I had decided to convert to Judaism. So that's kind of a positive thing in my life right now.
Kyle, I want to reflect back at you a great deal of chizuk, a great deal of strength projected into this coming year towards that relationship. I hope that that decision brings you an enormous amount of light in that relationship and into this coming year. And I send that back towards you in the form of light. Is there anybody else who wants to share on this question? Okay, so I'm going to offer a verse from the Psalms, which might be kind of familiar to you. And it's a verse that might be familiar because it comes from the Psalms that we sing on Friday evenings for Kabbalat Shabbat. Or Zarua Latzadik, Ul Yishrei Lev Simcha. Light is sown for the righteous. And I want to share with you, as I'm about to sing it, that this is also the name of the siman it's the cheeky name for the at-home version of tashlich, for the seed paper that Rabbi Schatz placed into people's bags for those who are unable to leave their home to do tashlich this year, that light should be planted for the righteous. So if you're going to do that this year, after Rosh Hashanah, then I encourage you to think about this line and to dwell on it as you do that as well, that light should be planted for the righteous, or that those who plant perhaps have righteousness sown for them. Or Zairu ala tzadik, uli shrilei simcha. Or Zairu ala tzadik, uli shrilei simcha. Or Zairu ala tzadik, uli shrilei simcha. Or Zaru ala tzadik, uli shrilei simcha. Now we'll move on to the next portion of our service.
So on page 77 is the Shema, which has become the central prayer of our tradition, the one that we teach our children when they go to bed, the one I learned when I was a child. And how many times have we said it and really stopped to think what it might mean? There's so many different ways to understand it. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. One way I would like to suggest of understanding it is that what we perceive as many are really, in fact, one. What that means is Adonai Eloheinu. Heinu is a plural word. It means our gods or our forces. Adonai Echad is one. So what we perceive as many are really one. And what we can understand about that is that there are maybe many manifestations of the divine. And not only that, there may be many selves that we may sense ourselves. We may sometimes feel that we are multiple entities. Sometimes we can be selfish, and sometimes we can be generous. Sometimes we're loving, and sometimes we can be vengeful. Sometimes we are patient, and yet many of us, me included, can get touchy. So this is going to be an exercise that tries to help you integrate all your various selves into a unified essential self. And the reason we want to do that, especially at this time of year, is because we're recognizing and acknowledging the different aspects of ourselves. Then we can finally begin the real work of teshuvah, or returning to who we are, returning to our essence, our pure, unadulterated self, which is one of the themes of our season. So what we're going to do is cycle through the Shema a few times in 4 different ways. Excuse me for a moment. Using 4 different intentions. The first way, you're going to sing it the way you normally do when you're in a service, kind of without giving it too much thought. This is to help to remove any self-consciousness that might hinder you from getting deeper into this exercise. The second way is that of someone shaking a close friend and telling them the most important thing they could ever hear. And this is the voice of authority and responsibility. The third way is that of someone reciting the Shema, their final Shema, on their deathbed. And this is the voice of acceptance and compassion. And the fourth way is one that unites the previous voices. And in doing the last voice, you try to be mindful of all the different paths that you've been along. The path of the everyday, the path of authority, and the path of compassion and acceptance, and to internalize and to integrate them. So let's begin. We'll go through it and I'll repeat the intention as we go through it. We'll do it a number of times. The first time, remember, just the normal way, and I'll model this for you each time. And please, if you feel comfortable, sing along with me. And we're going to unmute everybody so we can hear all our voices. It doesn't have to sound pretty. It just has to sound. Okay, so here we go. And for those who are looking for the words, they're on page 77 in your Machzor. Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Okay, the second way to remind you is someone shaking a friend, telling him this is the most important thing they've ever heard. Let's try that. Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
And then the third way is reciting your final Shema with the voice of acceptance and compassion. And the fourth way combines all the three previous ways. So keep those in mind as we chant it together.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Now we'll start the process over again. We'll start it with the first one, your normal voice. Ready? Here we go. Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Second way, shaking someone, the most important thing you could tell them. The voice of authority and responsibility. Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
The third way, your final Shema, the voice of acceptance and compassion.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
And now we'll pull them all four together, all three together into the fourth one.
Shema
Yisrael
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
We'll do this one more time, and then we'll, at the end of the next cycle, we'll go into silence for a few moments. Okay, the first one is your normal voice. Together.
My Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Take on close friend, the voice of authority. Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
The voice of compassion.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Now integrated all of the three previous Shemas.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Rabbi Chorny.
Sod hachamim unevonim. If you turn to page 81 in your Machzor, you'll see these words, and you can take a look at this supplication. You can translate this as misod, from the secret of, or inspired by, the wise ones, the chachamim, and the learned. I open my lips in prayer and supplication to entreat the sovereign of all sovereigns, the supreme ruler, This addition to the repetition of the Amidah is one of several personal prayers by the Chazan, who is the representative of the congregation before God. Now, the most famous personal prayer, of course, is the Hineni, which is lengthy. That one is the one that's sung before the Musaf service. There's a shorter one also. That one is Ochila Lael, and that one is chanted before the Malchuyot, the sovereignty section, the first of the three special sections of Musaf. There is a special nusach, a special melody that goes to these sections, the Misod HaChamim and Ochila Lael sections, and it goes like this. Misod HaChamim hu nifonim u'milemet vat medinim. These same melodic patterns, they appear also in Hineni and Ochila Lael. Ochila Lael, right? Hineni heyanim emos. They appear again and again, linking these poetic supplications to one another. We all occasionally serve as a representative for other people. It's not just me as the Chazan. You all have roles in your lives when you represent other people as well. Sometimes you serve as a representative for your family. Sometimes you serve as a representative for your employer. Sometimes you serve as a representative just of the Jewish people. You are a Jew, so you represent the Jewish people in the world. So I'll ask you to contemplate just for a few moments in your life, what other groups, perhaps ones that I haven't mentioned, do you represent? How are you perceived out in the world as a representative of one of those groups? And when you think about those groups, how do you wish to be perceived as a representative of them? And I'll extend that question further. How do you wish for that group to be perceived? Does it feel like a lot to be the representative of that group? Do you like being the representative of that group? Do you feel you have a choice being the representative of that group? And when you don't have a choice, do you feel you've accepted being a representative of that group? I invite you to think about all of those things, and particularly the idea of being a representative of the Jewish people in this moment, as we stand here on the first day of Yom Kippur. I'm going to sing a selection from, it's actually a teaching from the Talmud, from Brachot 64a. But it's a song that we sing often because this text was inserted in our Friday evening service. This became popularized as a text to sing between Friday evening services, the Kabbalat Shabbat portion of the service, and the Mariv service. And it became an unlocking text between the Friday evening service and the Mariv service for us to do. And there's this idea of L'ma'an achai l're'ai. Let's just make sure that anybody who is individually not Cantor Stern and myself can, at this point, now that we're done with that Shema exercise, we can individually mute ourselves again. That way we don't get any feedback. And also because this is a time, if we haven't made this clear already, for lowered inhibitions in singing, right? So if you're muted, it gives you the opportunity. We wanted you to have lowered inhibitions singing that Shema as well. But I hope that from especially behind a muted button, you have even lower inhibitions and that you'll feel free to sing along with L'ma'an achai l're'ai. and to hum along and to sway along as well. Lima,
Lana,
hi,
Rei,
hi, hi, Adabirana,
Adabrana, Aloma,
Lima,
Man Beka Shem Elogeinu, Akshatov,
Lima,
Man Beka
Adonai
Eloheinu Avakshatov,
Elohai, Adonai, Osli Hamoy,
Amoyitein,
Adonai, Osli Hamoy,
Amoyitein,
Adonai, Yivarech, Heitamo, Hey, 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 hey. Yeah, na, 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 na. Yeah, na, 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 na. Yeah, na, 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 na. Yeah, na, 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 na. Yeah, na, 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 Move to the next portion in our service.
On page 84, you'll notice there's a bet, the letter bet at the top, meaning it's for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, but it moves back and forth. In some traditions, they do it on the first day. Some traditions, they do it on the second day. And you'll notice, if you look, there are three little short lines at the end of each line. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch. It means God is the king, or God rules, God did rule, and God will rule. And then there's a refrain, Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch Leolam Voed. God will. God reigns, God will reign, and God reigned, then God will reign forever. So this is obviously a notion of a reflection of the theme of God's kingship. And what I love about this particular piyut, a piyut is a liturgical poem that was written in the Middle Ages mainly. And this one was written, the melody came from the Rhineland between the 12th and the 15th century. And there are certain melodies that came from this period, from this area, that have become known as Sinai tunes. Sinai is the Hebrew word for Sinai, Mount Sinai. And the reason they're called these is because they're so beloved and they feel ancient. They feel old. So it's an indication that we venerate or we love these melodies because of their ancientness. And it seems to go back to some remarks in a Kabbalistic work called Sefer Hasidim that assert that some of these songs were actually given to Moses at Mount Sinai. So the melody goes like this, and it's one of these melodies that you'll find in other sections of the Machzor during not just Rosh Hashanah, but also in Yom Kippur. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imloch, Leolam Vaed. I'll do that again. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imloch, Leolam Vaed. And that theme of God's kingship carries over in the special prayer that we do at the end of the shofar blowing on both days of Rosh Hashanah. Today we don't because it's Shabbat, but the Ashrei Ha'am. And we'll demonstrate that later on in the service. But it also appears in the V'nislach section right after the Kol Nidre. So there's that feeling of you're in the presence of the king after chanting the Kol Nidre. And so that's why that melody was applied to that section. So while the image of God as king may not resonate with us today, there are still times, though, when we may experience awe in our lives. By that, I mean a power beyond ourselves, moments of transcendence. So what I'd like us to do for a few moments is to sit and reflect moments in our lives when we have felt awe. Many of us have felt awe in nature, or at the birth of a child, or escaping from some terrible misfortune, or encountering a terrible misfortune. Whatever it is, let's sit back for a few moments and reflect on those moments of awe and moments of transcendence that have given us feelings that we are not alone, that there is a power greater than ourselves in the universe. When I think of these moments, I think of a moment in a mountain. In the mountains, some people find God or find that majesty on the sea. Some people find it in the mountains. And there's a beautiful, beautiful psalm, Esai, the melody by Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. Please join with me in your own spaces. Sing along. Esai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. I lift my eyes to the mountains from whence comes my help. Esai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, ose shamayim v'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai, עושה שמיים וארץ, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ. עזרי מעם אדוני, עושה שמיים וארץ. Over to you, Rabbi Chorny.
One of the other images of God from this season, beyond the image of God, is king, which we've spoken about a lot because Malchuyot, sovereignty, is such a large theme of Rosh Hashanah. One of the other themes is God as arbiter of justice, which of course is one of the responsibilities of a sovereign, but also God as lawyer, God as justice, God as judge. One of the pieces of our liturgy that speaks to this is Le'el Orech Din, page 85 in your Machzor, if you want to look at the liturgy itself. Le'el Orech Din, a poem to God, the Orech Din, the arbiter of justice, or the lawyer in modern Hebrew. And this particular poem, like so many of the poems in our Machzor, that don't necessarily utilize the Misinai mode, or as we explored before, the special modality, the special nusach that's used for Misod HaChamim, this one uses the Slicha mode, the Salicha, which is the word for forgiveness. Libochei livavot b'yomtim, ligolei deot v'adim. Other prayers that use the Salicha mode include Avinu Malkeinu. That might be familiar to you as an idea. Avinu Malkeinu, and we finish each line. And as we finish each line, we might finish without resolving that first line. And then Avinu Malkeinu, and we try to resolve the second line so you can feel that we're moving on to the next line. And then there's actually a motif that falls in there that has a special name to it called the Krova motif, which means the coming close motif, or the offering motif. Avinu Malkeinu. And then this particular mode goes Yedai dai dai dai, and then Avinu Malkeinu, and we finish with this ultimate motif. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. And by the way, so many of you have heard us doing this more often because we've been doing in our online prayers more insertion of Avinu Malkeinu and more insertion of Piyutim, and also more insertion of Tehillim, of Psalms, in order to make room for doing Mourner's Kaddish, which is the one type of Kaddish that we've been doing in exclusively virtual prayers through Temple Bethel. We also do this with Al Chet Shechatanu Lifanecha, with the Al Chets, which we'll do in the Vidui, in the confessional prayers over Yom Kippur. The melody is so simple, and this text, Le'el Orech Din, is composed of such short lines, making it easy for you as a congregation, for us as a congregation, to recite. The image of God as a judge can be so difficult to embrace. It can be just as difficult to embrace as God as a king. So we can all agree that justice is essential in maintaining a civil society, and yet it can still be hard to imagine that God is the arbiter of that. That theology is something to wrestle with today and every day. How do we pursue justice, particularly in partnership with God? What actions will we take in the new year to increase justice in the world? Let's contemplate that for a moment or two. You sustain the living through love, and with great mercy, give life to the dead. You support the falling, heal the sick, loosen the chains of the bound, and keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. Who is like you, Almighty, and who can be compared to you? Sovereign, who brings life and death and causes salvation to flourish. Michal Kel Chaim. You can find it on so many pages in the Mahzor, but you can also find it on page 82 specifically. Michal Kel Chaim b'chesed, Michayim meitim b'rachamim rabim. Omedim
Rofei Cholim Umatir Asuri Umekayim Emunato Leishenei Afar Milchama Al Gevurot Umidam Elah Melech Meimitu Mechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua.
We'll move to the next portion of our service.
On page 91, the bottom of the page, you'll see a beautiful, beautiful insertion that only occurs between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sefer Chaim, Baracha v'Shalom, Ufarnasa Tova, Yizacher v'Nikatev lefanecha, Anachnu v'chol Amcha Yisrael, l'chaim tovim u'shalom. In the book of life, may we be inscribed for blessing and peace and sustenance and goodness, and may we be remembered and written before you, we and all of the people of the house of Israel, for a good life and a peaceful life. This says it all. It's about everything that we could imagine we want for ourselves and for our families and our loved ones. The traditional melody that we all sing, I actually learned this year. I didn't know this before. It was composed by Rabbi Cantor Israel Goldfarb. He was the same composer as Shalom Aleichem Malachei HaSharet. He was born in 1893 in Europe, and he served as rabbi and cantor at a synagogue in Brooklyn for many, many years. And interestingly enough, his most famous bar mitzvah student was the composer Aaron Copland. And in those days, it was very radical to have a congregation sing along with the cantor. The cantors were the superstars, and they were the soloists So why should a congregation want to sing along? But Rabbi Cantor Goldfarb believed very strongly that getting people to sing was a higher level of prayer than just listening to someone else sing all the time. So this is, he created many congregational songs, and this is one of them. So let's sing it together. And then at the end, let's contemplate for a few moments what we want for ourselves, our loved ones, and the Jewish people. So we'll sing it together first, and then if you feel you'd like to join me in rising, please do so. B'sefer Chaim baracha v'shalom u'parnasa tova nizacher v'nikatev lefanecha אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. Again. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ייזכר ונכתב לפניך אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. Now let's contemplate or reflect for a moment the things that we wish for ourselves, for our families and loved ones, and for the people of Israel, and for the entire world. Let's move on to the next part of the service. Thank you all.
The shofar service, which again we'll experience tomorrow, not today because we take a break resting on Shabbat, is very short. It takes place in the middle of the Torah service. The shofar is preceded in its sounding by a psalm, basically, and then there are blessings, and then there are calls for the shofar, and the shofar itself is blown. And once the blasts of the shofar are done, there is this call out, this cry out before the familiar Psalm of Ashrei is done, the psalm that is completed with Psalm 145. First, this line, which you can find in your Machzor on page 120. Ashrei ha'am, really familiar line. Ashrei ha'am, yodei teruah, Adonai be'or panecha yahalechu. Joyous are the people who experience the calling of the shofar. Adonai, they walk by the light of your presence. This uses that same melody that Cantor Stern was talking about, that melody that was in the Adonai Melech piyut that we do in Shacharit. Ashrei ha'am yodei teruah Adonai bi'or panecha It's such a beautiful major melody, and you can see why it was preserved from those Rhineland, from those special Sinai days from centuries and centuries ago. It just stuck. It's almost haunting. And the question is, why are we joyous now? Now that the shofar service is done, why do we declare our joy here at this point in the service? I think it's because we entered the shofar service with trepidation, and we emerged after hearing the shofar in God's presence. We listened, we heard the shofar, and now we feel a certain way. The shofar has two holes, the opening where we blow, which is narrow, and that represents our diminished selves. Sometimes that's how we feel when we begin to stand before God. But then there's the other end, the end where we hear the sound explode out of the shofar. And that end is expansive, and it represents our fully realized selves. And that starts with listening and hearing the cry of the shofar. Ashri Ham Yodehei Teruah. People are joyous. We are joyous. We're happy that we hear the teruah, the call of the shofar on Yom Teruah. We're happy because we've begun the process of becoming those realized selves. So I want to ask you, in preparation for that shofar that you'll hear tomorrow, perhaps online, perhaps on a street corner, perhaps here if you're planning on coming to Ziering Family Field in one of those reserved services. When you hear that shofar, think for a moment as you prepare, what areas within ourselves would we like to expand, beginning now, beginning tomorrow, beginning this year? In what areas would we like to grow? In what areas would we like to go from being like that narrow end of the shofar to being like that wide end of the shofar? Let's take a few moments to contemplate.
kekeden.
Move on to the next section of our service as we've imagined putting away our Torah and into the special sections of Musaf.
So we are moving quite quickly now to the Musaf service, to one special section, the first one, the Malchuyot section. And you'll find it on page 154 in your Machzor. The Malchuyot, if you remember, is sovereignty, deals with God's sovereignty. Zichronot, God remembers, and Shofarot, God's reigning forever, the announcement of God's rule over all of humanity. Now, the Malchuyot section is introduced by a prayer that we're all familiar with from every service we've ever been to, the Aleinu. We always end the service with Aleinu, but it actually also appears here right at the beginning to introduce the Malchuyot section. And the melody that is used for it is not the same one that we use it during the year. Aleinu l'shabbat, that's the regular one. This is another one of those Misinai tunes. And the reason this prayer begins here is this is the beginning of the Kedushat Hayom section. And I'm going to explain what that is. On weekdays, we ask God for things. There's a central part of our Amidah that we ask for all kinds of things for ourselves and for our families and for Israel and so on. But on Shabbat and on holidays, we're not supposed to ask for things because we're so grateful for the holiness of these days that we don't need anything else. Therefore, these petitionary prayers are replaced in the Amidah and Shabbat and Chagim with a Kedushat Hayom, or holiness of the day section, which lets us express our gratitude, which is specific to the day. So on Shabbat, for example, the Kedushat Hayom, what you say is Mikadesh HaShabbat. It ends with that. On Chagesh, it's Mikadesh Yisrael V'Hazmanim. And on Rosh Hashanah, it's Mikadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron, which is the phrase that concludes the Malchuyot section. Now, this Aleinu, this is an acknowledgement that God is the sovereign. And it hints at a time at the end when God's name will be one. Now, this is a special point in the service, and at no other time during the year, except perhaps during the Avodah service on Yom Kippur, when the Jew traditionally prostrates oneself, touches one's head to the floor. And it's a symbol of humility before the king. And it's placed in the Kedushat Hayom part of the service, shows our gratitude. So this is the part when you say, Vanachnu korim umishtachavim umodim. And we bow, acknowledging the supreme sovereign, the Holy One, who is praised. And when you say mishtachavim umodim, that's when you touch your forehead to the floor. And the message here is that gratitude is the ultimate expression of the religious soul. And so one message of this prayer says is that we are profoundly grateful for the blessings and the opportunities of this holy season. So the melody goes like this. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol latet gedula leotzer bereshit shelo asanu kegoya ratzahot v'lo samahanu kemishpachot ha'adamah shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'goraleinu kechol hamonam. Rabbi Chorny.
I know that Not all of us are used to saying yes to this prostration, and that's for a lot of reasons. Maybe we didn't grow up taking our full bodies and putting them on the floor. Some of us grew up in congregations where only the rabbi or only the chazan or only the prayer leader did that. Some of us just aren't used to using our bodies in that way. Some of our bodies don't cooperate with moving in that way. But I want to invite us at this time to try. So I want to invite you to do one of two different things. I want to invite you to practice a little bit of a gratitude meditation, a quiet move in one of two different ways. If your body would cooperate in doing this, then I want to invite you to move into a full prostration for 1 minute. The first thing that you would do is you would take your body and you would turn it to the side from whatever table you might be at standing, and you move down to your knees. And after moving to your knees, you can move your body down so you can slide your arms out in front of you. And then you can slide down until your arms extend fully out in front of you and your head moves down until your forehead touches. And then you're lying out fully prostrate for just a moment, and then we can slide back up forward. If your body doesn't cooperate to do that, if that's not how your body works comfortably or you're not comfortable doing that, another way that you can participate in this meditation is simply to move forward and from a seated position to place your head on a table or into your hands. So I want to invite us to do that at this time. This is a good opportunity for me to practice. I'll be doing it shortly in Musaf a little bit later today and tomorrow. So we'll move into that now. And we'll do it for 1 full minute. And we'll move into a full prostration. Again, if you're going to do it fully with your bodies, then I invite you to move down to your knees first. And then when you're ready, you'll pull your body down into a comfortable position wherever you are. You can move into a nearby space with a slightly softer flooring beneath you, and then move down and just let your body be. Slide forward until your head gently touches the floor, and then we'll call you back up to attention in 1 minute. When you're ready, you can begin bringing your bodies back up into attention. I give you permission in your Makom Kavua this year, in whatever place that you've made your fixed place of prayer. When we reach Aleinu, if you're going to join in the rest of prayers this year, to take the space to bring yourself into a prostration and to use your body to help send signals back to your soul and to your brain, to just submit a little bit in a different way, because sometimes when we move our body, it helps to move us in a different way than we're able when we remain in the same standing or seating position as always. I hand this back over to you, Cantor Joel, to help us conclude.
So each time the shofar is blown during the repetition of the Musaf service, we recite, today is the birthday of the world, Hayom Harat Olam. Today the world stands as at birth. Today all creation is called to judgment. And it's also the day during which our spirits are renewed. We have stirred ourselves into awareness. We have sung and we have praised and we have pondered our mortality. We have accepted accountability for our own actions. We have acknowledged our responsibility for helping our fellow Jews and for repairing the world. And before we conclude, I want to give people the opportunity who wish to say Mourner's Kaddish. You can find it on page 174 of your Machzor. Page 174, the Mourner's Kaddish, and then we will conclude. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei v'chayechon uvyamechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yamaru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mavorach leolam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpoar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemeid kudusha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran v'alma v'yamaru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamaru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yamaru amen. May these days of awe be days of renewal, of commitment and joy for you and for all your loved ones. We'll conclude with the singing of Avinu Malkeinu, which you can find on page 93. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yada dai 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 dai. Yai die 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 die. Shabbat shalom, Shana Tova.
Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, and an enormous amount of gratitude to you, Cantor Joel Stern, as a member of our community, as a person of enormous dedication to this liturgy and to the experience of the High Holy Days, for taking this year, which is such a strange and unprecedented year in terms of its experiences, and turning it into a time and a space where we could share this together, where we could all share this together, and where the Temple Beth Am community and everyone who joined us could be enriched by your dedication, knowledge, and love of all of this liturgy. So thank you.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure working with you too. Thank you for being part of it.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And as a reminder, you can continue to join in all of the Zoom experiences by registration. You can continue to join in all of the YouTube experiences on our Temple Beth Am YouTube channel throughout today, throughout tomorrow, as we've mentioned so many times with the shofar added, tomorrow's experience. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova. And thank you again to Lucas, who is going to eventually end this live stream and this meeting. And thank you for being with us and helping us today. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.